Whistleblowing is many different things to a variety of people. To the wrongdoer, it represents betrayal and certainly provides a powerful incentive to kill the messenger. To the heads of institutions and agencies tainted by scandal, it represents an opportunity to clean house or perhaps continue a cover-up. Or to the news media, it's good story. To law enforcement, it's the best possible evidence. To the public interest community, it provides an opportunity to challenge the status quo. But I'm really here today to talk about you. What is whistleblowing to you? And I happen to have some suggestions for you. For one, it's inconvenient truth about all kinds of problems and issues. It's almost always bad news, too. For example, renowned whistleblower Rick Piltz worked at an agency dealing with climate in the federal government. His job was to compile all the results and the findings of $2 billion worth of federal research into climate change. And so when he would get done with these reports, he was supposed to send them to Congress, but instead, he was ordered to send them over to the Bush White House for an edit, a final edit. And then they would come back to him, and all of a sudden, the Arctic is gone, disappeared, gone, as if there was no research and no findings related to the Arctic. And also looking, he saw the adjectives and the adverbs and the tweaking of these words, and all of a sudden he realized that in terms of human contribution to climate change somehow seemed more questionable as a result of the edit. And who, of course, was doing this edit? I mean, a scientist, right? I mean, we would all expect that. No, I'm sorry. A lawyer. Now, hey, some of my best friends are lawyers. So obviously, we've just heard I'm a lawyer. And so I would just say, however, that we're not qualified to censor science reports. We're not qualified to edit them. And who was this editor at the White House at the time? Well, he just happened to be the top lobbyist for the American Petroleum Institute before he went to the White House. So, whistleblowing in terms of inconvenient truth. And then there's also whistleblowing that provides you choice. 3 whistleblowers decided to blow the whistle on what they called, or they dubbed, pink slime. And how they described it, and by the way, it was in 85% of the hamburgers consumed in the United States at the time. And how they would describe it, it was like hamburger, and then you put an extra condiment on this hamburger called Mr. Clean, or ammonia. And when ammonia would touch red meat, it would keep the red meat red forever, therefore pink slime. And then when the American people sort of heard about this, they were sort of turned off by it, the idea of eating this. And fast food restaurants across the country responded by refusing to serve it anymore. Grocery stores stopped selling it anymore. And then all of a sudden, all across the country, parents were going to school boards and saying to the school boards, we don't want our children to eat hamburger laced with ammonia. And that industry died. And then just a third example, safety, your safety. A few years ago, there was this terrorist threat. There's this confirmed terrorist threat on transcontinental flights. And what happened at the agency responsible for the air marshals? They took the air marshals off those flights for budgetary reasons, because they're having to put them up in hotels in other parts of the country, and it was just costing too much. So they took them off. Well, of course, that went public with the whistleblower, and then in 24 hours, all of a sudden the agency was saying, well, no, that was just an administrative mistake, an error. We reversed that. which is good. I mean, had you, however, been planning to take a transcontinental flight and you really had to get to the other coast, I think you might have taken the train or Greyhound bus, or maybe you would have just hitchhiked and been safer. So whistleblowers are providing choice. Providing information about choice, information about safety, information that you wouldn't have known otherwise in terms of inconvenient truth. But what really it comes down to is whistleblowers are redistributing power because they're giving you information you wouldn't have had, and information is power. It's fundamental. Conversely, those people who are able to control and contain information also retain that power. And there's some tragic examples of that. For example, it just so happened that there were a number of employees at Lehman Brothers who were really concerned because they were being pressured to sign up all kinds of people for mortgages that these people couldn't afford. And they knew this, and they were concerned. But they were told in no uncertain terms by the bankers that it was illegal for them to release this documentation. It would be a crime to report this crime. So they stood down. And then, as we know, those bad mortgages were turned into securities which are highly leveraged, and then all of a sudden, and so to unsuspecting investors too, and all of a sudden we had a meltdown of our economy. Another example, in Boston, at Logan Airport, a team of security specialists had determined that that airport was one of the least secure in the entire country. And in fact, they made some changes because the reports were really scathing. So they made some changes, but then the red team, or this special team, wanted to go back into the airport to test these changes, and they were told not to do it. They had to stand down. And so all of a sudden, of course, after that, we had 9/11. So if you're not convinced at this point that your personal power is tied in and tied to whistleblowing, let's talk about Congress. Because the one place they understand power in this country, it really is Congress. Members of Congress really understand power. And they understand that the information they need to have is what helps them retain their power. And even in the Congress, what we have going on right now is essentially a lot of acrimony. People are not getting along. The Democrats and Republicans, we all know this, the Democrats and Republicans are fighting all the time. They can't pass a budget. And there's all this dysfunction. But the one place where it's working, where they're working together, and it doesn't get headlines, you never hear about it, but they work together on whistleblowing legislation. It usually passes unanimously. And there's actually a whistleblower caucus in the House, and there's a caucus in the Senate just dealing with whistleblowing, because members of Congress know that in order to carry out their constitutional function, they have to have whistleblowers. They need that information. So they get it. And so now that we all know that your personal power is tied up with whistleblowing, what are you going to do about it? What can you do about it? And I just happen to have an idea. And that idea is to, just like you might have a membership in a gym, and you might have a program to actually enhance your health, what about your social, political, and economic health? Why not have a program for that and a plan for that? And part of that plan should be the preservation and the expansion of whistleblowing. Expansion of your own personal power. Why can't that be part of the plan? And it's really called engagement. There are whistleblowers to be defended, And there are these revelations that need to be promoted, and there is this legislation that needs to pass. All that needs engagement. And I know all of us have different talents and abilities, but the one thing that's common to most of us is there are communication tools that no one ever dreamed of 20 years ago. You can be involved. You can write letters to Congress, sign petitions, participate in virtual meetings and conferences. You can do unlimited research from your home, from your bedroom. You can be engaged as never before. And how should you be engaged in a whistleblowing scenario? And I would just say there are 3 different things that need to happen. First of all, there's the whistleblower. Then there are the revelations from the whistleblower. And again, there's the legislation. In terms of the whistleblower themselves, civic organizations, professional associations, churches, and synagogues, when they're involved and engaged with whistleblowing and whistleblowers, it makes all the difference in the world in terms of the morale for the whistleblower, in terms of the support that they really need for their efforts. They need jobs, they need job counseling, and they also need lawyers. They need that support. And also, if you know whistleblowers, one thing you will know is that they're the hardest working people, they have the highest ethical standards, they have the highest professional standards, and 99% of them would do it again. Even though they might lose their jobs, even though they might actually lose their careers, they would do it again. Now, those are really good people to be associated with. Or you might decide, well, I would like to focus on the revelations from the whistleblowers. And there was a grandmother down in the South who had read the affidavits from a number of meat inspectors. They're anonymous affidavits from a number of meat inspectors who were talking about a Department of Agriculture program, which was essentially speeding up line speeds of poultry plants to 175 birds per minute. That's a third of a second per bird as it went down the line. And they were supposed to see the contamination and the disease and the filth and do something about it. And they couldn't, so they were very frustrated. They wrote the affidavits, and this grandmother decided, well, I'll be their voice. I used to work for the industry. I'll be their voice. And she conducted a petition drive that got 200,000 people signed up to participate in challenging the Department of Agriculture for this program. Now, you might not want to be the tip of the spear like that, but what about signing the petitions? And what about getting your entire social network to also sign those petitions? Or in the case of one person that went very far with this, and it's actually a horrible story, but at a Vermont slaughterhouse, there was a calf that was hanging, and it was being skinned alive, which happened to be illegal a century ago. And there was a meat inspector who saw that, and it's on the audio part of the video. The meat inspector said to the abuser of the animal, oh, you're really lucky the doctor's not there. And who was the doctor? Well, the doctor was our client, who happened to be a veterinarian with 35 years of experience. And he had raised concerns about this particular slaughter plant in terms of the abuse of animals. But no one was listening to him. As a matter of fact, they were sending him for retraining because of his accusations about that plant. But when that went viral, everything changed. There were congressional hearings. The Department of Agriculture set up a special ombudsman just to deal with these kind of concerns. And the state of Vermont prosecuted the owner of the plant and the plant itself for animal abuse, and they were convicted. All that because of this video. and that video was in support of the whistleblower. Everything changed. Now, that's more than just the tip of the spear. That's the entire spear in terms of activism. Now, if there's also legislation. And I would just start with to say is it should never be a crime to report a crime. And I don't care if you're talking about banking or national security or you're talking about agriculture, because believe it or not, the agricultural interests have gone all over the country to the state governments to try to make it a crime to take a video like that in those facilities. So that needs to be opposed. Also, it should really be illegal for any agency or any department of government to actually conduct a criminal investigation of a whistleblower as a reprisal. So these are three areas of your engagement that really need your support. And I'll go a little bit further with this. And I'll say that if everybody in this room decided that every week you're going to do one overt act in support of whistleblowing, one thing in support of whistleblowing, that's your program. And you would also, part of this program, recruit 2 people a month through your social networks, church, whatever, that you would also engage 2 other people to do the same, and all this playing forward. In 4 years, 400,000 people would be engaged in, it would be a whole city of activism around change. And they would be committing every year 20 million acts, overt acts in support of whistleblowing. Phenomenal engagement. Starting here. Robert Kennedy, when he met with the youth in South Africa, said that their acts of courage, their protests, their suffering, their standing up against apartheid, that it was like throwing pebbles into the water, but that the collective result of all their acts of courage would one day sweep up a whole wave that would knock down the walls of repression and resistance. So too, your engagement in solidarity with those who are enhancing your power will move mountains. The resulting social change will absolutely be phenomenal. We won't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I can promise you it will be glorious to behold.